Good afternoon. Hi. If I could get everybody's attention, please. Good afternoon. My name is Shelley Cohn, and it is my sincere pleasure to welcome you today on behalf of Respectability and all the organizations listed on the screen behind me to this groundbreaking conference on empowerment for Jewish women with disabilities and their allies. The planners of this convening are a terrific group of Jewish women with and without disabilities who are yearning to see more Jewish women with disabilities play a greater role in both our community and the civic world at large. As many of you know, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, 18.6% of the general population has some form of disability. Chances are that number is even higher for Jews because we tend to marry within the fold, and therefore the genetic propensity for a disability is increased. Take a moment to think about it. That is almost 20% of our Amcha, a fifth of our people. Can we honestly say we see every fifth person that attends our synagogues, schools, and Jewish organizations as having some form of disability? I suspect not. And that, in turn, brings us to today. This conference, started by Respectability, a national organization that fights stigma and advances opportunities for individuals with disabilities, realizes that the neurotypical or able-bodied population needs the voices of those with disabilities to be more fully inclusive. We have created this empowerment training where you will be hearing from an amazing group of women with disabilities who have learned to own their disability and have found a voice to not only be self-advocates, but have become voices of leadership within their communities. We hope this afternoon proves to be time well spent and you leave inspired by these role models. We very much want to know how you feel about this event, so please do not leave today without filling out the feedback surveys that are located on your table. We will be collecting them at the door. And just in case you have an aha moment during the course of the afternoon, there are some boards on the side there with sticky notes, and please take that aha moment idea and stick it on the side so that we too can all learn from the insight that you've just developed. Lastly, let me introduce to you the two truly fabulous women who are standing by my side. Vivian Bass, beautiful woman in the purple, my co-chair of Jewish Inclusion at Respectability, and Rabbi Julie Schoenfeld, the Chief Executive Officer of the Rabbinical Assembly, the international organization of the conservative Masorati rabbis. You will be hearing from both of them throughout the day. And now, without further ado, let's all turn our cell phones off and begin what I'm sure will be a memorable afternoon. Please enjoy.
Thank you, Shelley. So I have the privilege and the pleasure, I was asked to give some continuity, a sort of golden thread of Jewish tradition throughout the day's activity, and to share a little nugget of Jewish wisdom at several intervals, of which this is the first. And I have to tell you that something that I thought about a lot is that one of the very important things about Respectability and about this event today is the recognition that the Jewish community needs a lot more wisdom about inclusion of people with disabilities and needs to grow in this in many ways. And so I offer these nuggets with the hope that we can bring all of this great wisdom to make our communities more inclusive, more supportive, and also of a recognition of the work that we have yet to do. And so in that spirit, the Brachot, the Gemara in Brachot, quotes the Mishnah as follows. Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, on entering and leaving the house of study, used to offer a short prayer. What did he say? He said, "On entering, I pray that no offense, that no error should occur through me, and on leaving, I give gratitude for my portion." The Gemara, the sort of explanation of this teaching, said, what did he used to say specifically on entering? He would say, "May it be your will, O Lord my God, that no offense occur through me, that I don't stumble in the matters of the best of our tradition, and that my colleagues have reason to rejoice together with me in these teachings. That I not pronounce anything to be good and okay, which is not, and that I don't fail to acknowledge that which is good and okay, which has not sufficiently been acknowledged before. And that I, too, will rejoice in the teachings of my colleagues and friends."
Thank you, Rabbi Julie. So, to let some music send the message for why we're here, we invite singer-songwriter Joni Leeds to share how good and how nice it is to see Jewish sisters sitting here together for a greater good. Hine ma tov.
Hine ma tov u'manayim shever hayot gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shever hayot gam yachad. Hine ma tov shever hayot gam yachad. Hine ma tov, hine ma tov. Ya la la, ya la 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 la. Hine ma tov, hine ma tov. Ya la la, ya la 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 la. Hine ma tov u'manayim shever hayot gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shever hayot gam yachad.
Thank you. And as we sit together, here is a new spin on an older song, "I Am Woman." This iconic song empowered women and feminists during the 1970s. "I Am Woman" has been adapted for our time together today. Our voices matter. As Jewish women, hear us roar in numbers too big to ignore. Feel free to join Joni in singing this empowering song.
I am a woman, hear me roar, in numbers too big to ignore. And I know too much to go back and pretend, 'cause I've heard it all before, and I've been down there on the floor, and no one's gonna keep me down again. Oh yes, I am wise, but it's wisdom born in pain. Oh yes, I paid the price, but look how much I've gained. If I have to, I can do many things. I am strong, I am invincible. I am woman. Bend but never break us, 'cause it only serves to make us more determined to achieve our final goal. And we come back even stronger, not a novice any longer, 'cause you've deepened the conviction of my soul. Oh yes, we are wise, but it's wisdom born in pain. Oh yes, we've paid the price, but look how much we've gained. If we have to, we can do anything. We are strong. We are invincible. We are woman. We are woman. Watch us grow. See us moving to and fro as we spread our loving arms across the land. But we're still an embryo with a long, long way to go. But until we make all aliens understand, oh yes, we are wise, but it's wisdom born in pain. Oh yes, we paid the price, but look how much we've gained. If we have to, we can do anything. We are strong. We are invincible. We are Jewish. We are woman. We are woman. We are woman.
Thanks so much to Joni Leeds and to our violinist, Respectability's own Debbie Fink.
Okay, so we are now going to move into our first panel to set up our discussions for the day. And I'm going to ask our panelists to take a minute and come and join me here at the front table. People need a moment to collect themselves at your tables. Do, and we'll be right back with you in just a minute.
Cool.
We're in trouble now.
Right over there, and I'll have a 3-minute, 1-minute, get off. Where's the hook?
All right, so thank you all for coming back together. We hope that throughout the day, I know that one of my goals, which I'm already have really derived a lot of joy and strength from, is meeting new people. So please do take these little moments, these interstices, to meet the people at your table. And I hope that we'll all walk away with some new friends today. I'm sure we will. So today's panel, our opening panel, is about leadership and about self-empowerment. And I have been told that since we have slides on each of our very esteemed panelists, I will not read their introductions. There is, however, a disclaimer slide There we go, the disclaimer that all of us here, including me, are speaking on our own behalf, not on behalf of respectability. So we thank you for the opportunity to share so freely. In terms of the subject of our discussion, I want to just give one more, Jewish thought and Jewish nugget. And as I indicated when I began, Judaism isn't only what we read in the books, right? It's not only what was passed down to us, but every person sitting in this room is a wise Jewish person who is bringing forth our tradition through your lived experience. And one woman who was a great inspiration to me, I can remember meeting her in the kosher butcher shop on Oxford Avenue in the Bronx when I was 4, turning 5 years old, and that is Bella Abzug, known for her hats, right, which she wore to make sure that no one forgot her. And Bella was an incredibly brave, courageous woman. She served in Congress from 1971 through 1977, and she took a tremendous number of risks to stand for what is right. And when I was a girl, in the early 1970s, it was made very clear to me that a lot of what Bella Abzug was about being a woman in politics. And that image is really etched on my mind. And so I found this nugget. She was not only a great trailblazer, but she was a great student of Judaism, love of Israel. And she said the following: the test for whether you can hold a job should not be the arrangement of your chromosomes. And I think that there's quite a lot to learn from that. The test of what God puts in our heart is who we are and how we bring it forth into the world. And with that, it's a great pleasure and privilege to turn this over to Isla Eckhoff, who as I told you, Isla, I'm very inspired to read your Option B entry on the web, and I definitely commend it to people. And there is your bio, and we turn it over to you.
Hi. I usually don't need one of these, but we'll see. Maybe it'll make a difference. Anyway, so my name's Isla Eckhoff. I am a managing director at BlackRock, which is, for anybody who doesn't know, the largest asset manager in the world. I lead an industry and counterparty management efforts, so I do a lot of advocacy for the firm and participate. I sit on boards, industry committees, advisory panels. I also sit on the board of the Cerebral Palsy Foundation. So by way of background, I have CP. I was born with CP. My mother and I both hemorrhaged all the way to the hospital. I had about 12 surgeries between the ages of 2 and 14. I work in predominantly, or historically, what was predominantly male-dominated financial services industry, where the only time I saw somebody with one of these is if they broke their leg skiing over the weekend, right? So I come from a place where, thank God, the world has changed, and it's much more open and flexible for people with disabilities today. And I actually am also the MD sponsor for BlackRock's Ability Network, because I'm sick and tired of the word disability. It bores me. It's about what we can do. And I'm tired of talking about what we can't do, and I'm very focused on talking about what we can do, because that's what we really should do. And to somebody's earlier point about the fact that 20% of the globe basically has some form of physical or visible or invisible disability. So that's 20% of the population that's not being properly serviced, either by the asset management industry or any other business for that matter. So hiring people with disabilities is not about doing something that's nice to do. It's about doing something that makes good economic sense, right? And there's been a tremendous amount of research around inclusion and disability, and that people from different backgrounds, different experiences, enable businesses to make better decisions, right? So hence why, thank God, in this day and age, there's a lot of inclusion and disability programs around. So self-advocacy is something you'll hear a lot about today. I think it's a very personal experience, and everybody has to figure out what that voice is for them. But just like in Judaism, where we can't let certain things be forgotten, people with disabilities have to speak. That voice has to be heard. Everybody has to find their own voice. And at different stages of my life, I've had a different kind of voice. I'm a little bit more comfortable with it now in my current age than I was growing up. So I'll tell you two quick little notes. One is I was probably about 8 and going through, or about to go through another set of surgeries and feeling pretty miserable and sorry for myself. And we lived on Long Island at the time, and my dad dragged me through the Cerebral Palsy Center on Long Island, where it was basically a workshop for people that couldn't work elsewhere because they were just too disabled, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to work. And it was, to say it was scary was an understatement. He dragged me literally on my knees through this center from one end to the other. And when we got outside, he said, I don't want you to ever feel sorry for yourself again, because the difference between you and them is probably another 30 to 60 seconds on the way to the hospital and not enough oxygen getting to their brain. So it can happen to anybody. So be grateful for what you have as opposed to being miserable for what you don't, right? And that's a lesson I learned pretty early. I was very fortunate to have a father that was my biggest advocate. But he also told me that I had to be better, smarter, and faster than anybody else if I wanted to be looked at as an equal. He said, you will walk into a room and people will make assumptions. So you will need to teach them that those assumptions are wrong. But understand, that means you have to work harder, be faster, and be smarter. So, look, we all need to accept who we are, the gifts or not that God's given us, right? And then make the best of those tools. It's really important. And then later on, when it comes to going to get a job, so I know Lori's going to talk later, and she's from Ernst & Young. I worked at Arthur Andersen for a while. And when I was interviewing for that job, it was a lot of traveling, and you had to carry these big briefcases and heavy files. And I could tell the partner that was interviewing me was concerned because he saw me walk in with a cane. So I kind of saw that look and had seen it many times through many job interviews. And I said, just so we're clear, there is one thing I can't do. If you're going to need me to ride a bicycle, we're going to have a problem. Right? And he laughed, and I laughed, and he actually offered me the job on the spot, which is unheard of, right? Because it's a very formal process. But, having a sense of humor and being realistic about who you are. So we'll talk about, self-disclosure. So I work for a big firm. I walk in the door, you can't miss it, right? But when I walked into my office before 5 years ago, I'd put my cane in the corner, or if I'd go to a conference or go to a meeting, it went under the table. And if you didn't see me get up and walk around, you'd never know. And then 5 years ago, I met certain people. I now sit on the board of the Cerebral Palsy Foundation, and now I wear it proud like a flag, right? So things change, and again, you're constantly going to evaluate what your voice is and how you do it, but it's really important that you use that voice, right? And find what's comfortable for you. And it's going to be different for everybody, right? So Julie was kind enough to mention my lovely little story. There are kind of 5 principles that I live by, that I sort of focus my head around, and that is really about being yourself and seeing yourself as you want to be seen, right? So I have CP. I am not CP, but I have cerebral palsy, but I don't see myself as somebody with a disability when I'm out there and walking around, right? Pick a path. If it turns out to be the wrong one, change it, make a different decision. You're not locked into every decision that you make. The decision you make at one point in your life, it may be entirely different at the other. Be realistic about what your strengths are and also what your limitations are, so that you focus on the things that you're good at, like we all do, disability or not, and try to minimize the things you're not as good at, right? Because why not? And gratitude and success to me, it might as well be one word. It's 2 words, but it's really one. Because at the end of the day, I am truly grateful for where I sit, the job I have. I've worked at 10 different firms before I got to BlackRock. I'm now a managing director at the biggest firm in the world, right? I worked my ass off to get there, and I'm proud of that. right? And so I'm happy to be a mentor and an advocate, not only for people with disabilities, but for women in general throughout, right? Be an advocate. You know, if you're not comfortable doing it for yourself, do it for somebody else. Trust me, you'll find your voice. And then last of all, be relentless, right? I never give up. I'd much rather beg for forgiveness than ask for permission. I really don't. And one last thought. We talked about the word empowerment, and when I looked it up when we were on the phone the other day, it says to give authority to. I take authority. I don't give it to anybody, right? I own it. My daughter's sitting right there. Ask her. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. That is beautiful. And I want to remind people, I believe we have cards, right? Well, there are cards on the table, so we will have 15 minutes at the end to take people's questions of our panelists. So thank you, Isla. We now turn to Amy Rosenfeld, whom I've really had the pleasure of getting to know during this period of time preparing for this panel, and hearing about Amy's really incredible work with some of our youngest folks here at the JCC in our community. And Amy, without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to you on the subject of self-empowerment, self-leadership.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So, I was thinking about this, and I write letters to editors, and a few years ago, I wrote a letter to the editor about the Disability Pride March here in the city. And so I wrote, the public needs to see us for our abilities, not our disabilities. If we take the dis out of the word, we have the word abilities, and that is what we all need to be noticed for, our abilities, and do not look down on us. It is more important to get the word out that we are individuals, and I prefer the term altered abilities, or just to see us for who we are, and see our strengths, and what we're good for. And that really meant a lot to me, because I don't like the word disabilities. I like to be seen for who I am and my abilities, and that really hit hard. And I do work with the younger ones here, and as a librarian, and some of that comes out when I do story times with the kids, because I make up stories about, kind of like, just be who you are. It's okay to be that way. It's okay to be who you are, and look at all the great you do. And about a week ago, I was thinking about also empowerment. I had some time, and it's advocating for yourself and giving yourself a voice, and not taking no for an answer. I don't take no for an answer. I stick up, I stick up for myself. I stick up for my husband. I stick up, for people. And it's okay to say who you are. It's okay to be who you are. And I think I also find empowerment, obviously, through my writing and through my art and creativity, and also just finding a way to make it happen. And, I just like to write. And my art is a form of empowerment. And just getting out there and seeing your strengths and getting the word out, and just keep on trying and pushing. And I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Amy. I can see that we are working towards what are going to be really also a very fascinating question and answer period. One of the quotes that I read when I was preparing for our day together is from the current political figure Dianne Feinstein. And she said several years ago, women have begun to realize that when they come through the doorway, they bring other people with them. And I think that's such a powerful message of what we're talking about here, that everybody is not only asserting their own abilities and strengths, but also bringing so many people with them. And so with that, I also turn now to our third panelist, Dr. Danielle Shapuk, who is a psychologist, a sexpert, and to very much in her career not brings what she learns and is to helping other people.
Hi, it's good to be here. So that's true. I do talk a lot about dating, sex, and disability, and I try and I feel like I have a very big voice when it comes to that topic. And so I guess my interest in dating, disability, and sex began when I was in high school. And I remember this time when I have a younger sister who's just about 2 years younger, so we're pretty much kind of close. And we were sitting at the kitchen table, and my family had some friends come over that we hadn't seen in a while. And I remember them going to my sister saying, "Oh, are you dating anyone? Oh my God, you're single? Really? You're so pretty. We have someone for you. Do you want to meet someone?" And I kind of just sat there and felt really bad and felt that I was not a part of that at all. And I wasn't quite sure why, because I knew that I did like boys, like all my girlfriends did at the time, and I was interested romantically. So today we're going to talk about dating, sex, and disability in a way. When the topic comes up, people sometimes skirt around it or feel uncomfortable, or they don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of it or the nitty-gritty. And today we're going to do that today. We're going to get down and dirty. That's what I was going to say, which is appropriate. So I knew something wasn't right in high school, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. I thought maybe I am different. I don't know. I don't feel different. So I wound up going to grad school in New York City with the hopes of being in a big city, finding a lot of, hoping people would be open-minded and not be so judgmental. And, because you can be anybody in New York City and people would not look at you or walk around you or step over you. So I'm like, oh, that's perfect, because I want to fit right in to the dating scene. And I did put up my first Match.com profile, encouraged by my roommate. And when I got my first email, I was like, I wanted to hide under the table. I didn't know. I was like, wait, can they see me? Like, I don't know what to say. And that was the start of my dating life, which is notable because if you think about it, that's grad school. So I was, in my early 20s. So that's also very characteristic of people with disabilities. We start later when it comes to dating, and we have a lot less dating experience and opportunities, and there's a lot of statistics like that, which I really won't get into because at that time I was really into Sex and the City, and I was starting to date, but I knew there was like a discrepancy between myself and my girlfriends. I was like, I was getting some dates, but they were getting much more, and I felt, well, we're so comparable on so many levels. The only thing different is my disability. So I want to talk to someone about it. I want to ask for advice. And I looked around and I was thinking, where's my Carrie Bradshaw in a wheelchair? Like, who am I going to talk to? My parents weren't talking about it, and my friends probably really didn't know what to say. So I'm like, okay, that's it. It was like my calling right there. So I began writing a little bit, and then there's 3 pivotal points in my career after that. So I'll talk briefly about the 3 of them. So the first one was my friend called me one night and was like, oh my gosh, I found something online and it's perfect for you. It's the Miss Wheelchair New York pageant, and they look at intellect, like your academic achievement, but they also look at glamorousness. I think that was the word. They use glamour. And I thought, oh my God, that's the first time I ever heard disability paired with the word glamour or style or cool or something, rather than intellect and inspiration. I said the word. So I thought, let me enroll in the pageant and let me try and win it. and let me use the title along with my PhD to really open the window and start talking loudly about this topic. So that's what I did, and I hired a publicist, and we hit the ground running, because in my campaign is a two-part campaign. It has to be media exposure, because to me that's one of the main issues. It's because we do not see people with disabilities dating on television or like engaged in romantic relationships. So I feel like it could be as simple as that. Like if you saw me on whatever, TLC or ABC, dating someone and kissing someone or making out with someone, then the whole world would be like, oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah, people with disabilities date, no big deal. Like, that's normal. It's just our lack of exposure that's the main problem. So media is the first way that I get out there, and the second way is through my private practice with my patients, which I'll talk about in a minute. So then after the Miss Wheelchair, I met a designer named Carrie Hammer, a fashion designer, and she had a show. She was having a show during New York Fashion Week, and she wanted to use role models instead of runway models, just women in the community who were doing great things. And we were on the phone one night and just talking, and she was like, do you want to come to my show? I'm like, yeah, I don't want to come to your show. And then she's like, at the same time, we were kind of like, wait, you should be in the show, or can I be in the show? And we thought, yeah, that's a great idea. And then we were thinking, well, is the runway accessible? And then she's like, I don't care. We'll get wood. We'll build a ramp. I'm like, yeah, we'll build a ramp. We're going to make it happen. I'll do whatever it takes. So I called this local news outlet, the only connection I had at the time, Women's E! News, and I said, hey, I'm going to be in the show. Do you want to cover it? And they said, yeah, okay, we'll cover it. And they did. And the next day, I woke up and was excited to see the write-up. And what turned out was HuffPost picked it up, and it went viral. So after that, Carrie and I were doing morning shows, because it was the first time someone in a wheelchair ever was on the runway in Fashion Week. So that's something that was, we're already in 2013 or 2014 at that point. So, the runway already had a lot of diversity except for us, and why not us? And finally, the third point was I did a TED Talk after that, a TEDx talk on disability and sexuality. And that was really a way for me to talk about the topic. And, when you prepare for a TED Talk, it's supposed to be solution-focused. So you can't go up there and complain about a problem and not offer a way to see it another way. So I thought, okay, how can I get people in the audience to entertain dating people with disabilities and not out of the goodness of their heart? Because I'm tired of that crap. I'm tired of being looked at in that way. So I thought, well, from my studies, I know that, humans can be inherently selfish. So let me talk about how they could improve their own dating lives, or why their dating lives is maybe lacking, and my point was because they're ignoring a whole group of possible dating partners, and that's people with disabilities. So the divorce rate is so high, and people are often unhappy in their relationships. So maybe you should open your eyes and look around for other partners. So after that, with media, I also do my private practice, which is my main gig, if you will. And I set it up where I see my clients or patients online, and I wanted to make it easier for people with disabilities to come to therapy. So I have clients who, maybe have home attendants or nurses who don't give them privacy. I had someone email me one time saying, could we do sessions over the phone? Because I literally have no privacy. I have nurses with me all the time in my family. And I said, okay, you know what, you can't really do therapy over the phone. So I said, let's try one thing. Let's try it one time. Tell them you're going on Facebook, go in your room, let's try a session. If it works, it works. If not, it doesn't. And now I've been seeing her almost 4 years every week. So it gives people a chance for privacy. I have clients who are nonverbal, who use like Tobii Dynavox system, who type with their eyes, and I can see it on the screen. And I have people without disabilities. Internet is easier for everyone. But I guess I will kind of conclude with the topics that my clients come to me with. And it's really everything and anything, and we could talk about it at the round table today. And it's like, well, where do I find a romantic partner if I have a disability, or what happens if I need to bring a home attendant with me? I have one client who brought her home attendant on a date, and the home attendant sat in the back, and they had like a signal if she needed help with something, so it wouldn't disrupt the date. Or how to have sex if you have a disability, when to reveal you have a disability, or how much to reveal, or what sex toys are available to use if you can't use your hands, or if you need help with someone placing them, or how do you have privacy to do that if you live at home, or even to the topic of sex surrogacy. I don't know if anybody saw the Sessions, or, I mean, that's really the iconic movie, but how do you hire someone to engage in therapy with you in an intimate way so you could learn about your body when it's hard to do that with with someone you might meet on the internet or just organically. So we can talk a lot about this in our roundtables. There's really so much to say. It's hard to break it down in 10 minutes. I was hoping to take up some of Amy's time, but that's okay. I won't. So that's it. I look forward to seeing you guys in the group.
So if we have cards with questions, do we have people, if our table hostesses are sending up any cards with questions for our speakers? Give that just 1 minute. And in the meantime, I'm going to ask my first question. So my first question to all of you is, you know, you've each been on a journey. Everyone is on a journey. And if you could look back 10 years, 20 years, right, with what you know now, and say, I would coach my younger self to do this, right? I would coach myself of 10 years ago. And by the way, I know, speaking for myself, not the early days of my life, and I still need coaching, and there's still years ahead of me that I might spend better or less well. So it's not just about people who are just starting on their journeys, but what is the one piece of advice that each of you would give to your earlier self? Start with, anybody want to start? Anybody willing to start?
I could start. Yeah, I could start. No. Yeah. So I would tell my younger self that, I spent, I have great parents, and they told me, they wanted me to fit in. So a lot of it is, I was the only one in grade school, the only one in high school in a wheelchair. So it was kind of like, fit in the best you can, and you have a disability, but you could do what everybody else can, and not minimize it, but, just do your thing in school, don't make a big deal out of it. And I see this a lot in the disability population and with my clients. So it kind of breeds this environment of trying to hide your disability or downplay it so you can kind of fit in or pass as, quote unquote normal. And that's like very detrimental. So and it's very ableist, because you're feeling ashamed or embarrassed about something that's a significant part of who you are. And it's something that shouldn't be shameful or embarrassing. So I would tell my younger self to embrace it, the fact that it's different, but everybody's different. So don't try and downplay it. And maybe I would have had more confidence back then in high school when it came to dating, and I could have approached, I'll just use boys differently, and maybe I would have had more dates or a date to prom. So that's what I would have told myself.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else want to address? Yes?
I would say look for your strengths and look for your inner strengths and you know, and take that and go with that. I think that that's really, and never say never and don't take no for an answer. That's what I say.
Thank you. Ayla?
I think for me, I had a lot of anger and frustration that I ended up having to find outlets for, and I think I probably would tell my younger self now to just, I wish I could have taken a breath. I wish I could have learned meditation earlier. I use that now to kind of bring my stress level down. I've kind of created my own 1-minute meditation that gives me a chance to take the air out. Because I don't think I ever really gave myself a break. I drove myself pretty hard, and I'm better at it now. So, yeah, just take a breath.
Thank you. So there were a number of really excellent questions that came. Some of them I'm going to flag them for the small groups, so I'll mention those and flag them specifically. But here is one that I'd like to start with. Can you name and talk about a time where you faced ableism and or discrimination from people who were supposed to help you? And I'll add maybe even from people who you think wanted to help you, you know, who just weren't really educated enough to be able to do it. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
And could you repeat the question too?
Thank you. So first, to give a definition of ableism, Debbie, is there a definition that Respectability uses? Remembering my disclaimer, I speak only for myself.
As Mrs. Off the cuff, don't hold me to it, but ableism is, I would say, a context for people who are ableist who make assumptions about people with disabilities that they, here we go, thank you. So the official definition is discrimination or prejudice against individuals with disabilities. There you go, very simple.
So going back to the question, can you name and talk about a time when you faced ableism or discrimination from people who were supposed to help you? And I'll also offer a second spin on the question. You can take either one, but can you give us some advice on how to work with people who want to be our allies, right? Can you think of some time when you were able to help people be better allies for you? Either way you'd like to take the question.
So when I was a kid growing up in the 60s, I took a lot of bumps and bruises for a lot of different things. Kids would steal my crutches, trip me going down the hallway, trip me going down a flight of stairs, just caused me all kinds of pain and suffering. And then, you know, some of them would happen in school, and my dad would talk to people in school, and it didn't really change. So then my dad went out and bought me a punching bag and boxing gloves, taught me how to fight, told me to go into school the next day, and the next kid who picked on me, don't go after him, pick the biggest one out of the crowd and deck him. If you deck the biggest kid in the crowd that's making fun of you, then everybody will understand that they should leave you alone. So my father, who was my advocate, was fabulous. Obviously, everybody in school and camp and other places where they were supposed to protect me, they weren't particularly good at it. So I learned to do it myself. And I had to pick that fight between, I don't know if whoever went to elementary school, there used to be those double doors, right? So, because I couldn't move much, and at the time I had metal crutches, I had the ones that go around your wrist. So I had my physical therapist teach me how to use them to get somebody in a headlock, because I figured whoever I was going to fight was going to be bigger than me. Get the kid in a headlock, bring him down to his knees, so now we're the same size, and literally punch the crap out of him until somebody in the school pulled me off. And I'd never had to do that again. And once I did that, other people started sticking up for me because they realized I would stick up for myself. Kind of a weird story, but I think it makes the point.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So an example that I could think of was when I was on a date, and I talk about this in my TED Talk. It was our third date into whatever it was that was happening, but I met him online, and I thought things were going really well, and I feel like once you get past the second date, that means a lot. It's like in current times. So I was feeling good, I was feeling relaxed, I was feeling confident, and then I remember he, like the conversation got a little awkward, or he seemed awkward, or there was some sort of like tension, and so finally he mentioned that he was concerned that he wanted to have a family, and he wasn't sure how I would manage that, or how I would be a mother, or how I would help raise children, or clean the house, or clean his dirty underwear, whatever. And I was like, well, that's easy. I mean, I could manage that the way I manage my life now. I just have people who help me. I have assistants. So that was kind of ableistic thinking, because he just assumed that I wouldn't make a good wife or mother. And that's all stereotypes. There's no truth to that at all. So I guess to help, I think that sometimes people just don't know. They just maybe because of lack of exposure don't know how to go on a date or take someone out with a disability, because online some frequent questions, and my patients get this all the time. The number one is, can you have sex? And so, of course, I mean, why not? People, this is really, I don't mean to be graphic, I'm speaking for myself now, but I mean, people have sex with, anything in any way, and in different types of positions, so of course, it's possible. And then also, how to take out someone on a date, or maybe they're not sure if they're, my last point is their friendship circle. Like sometimes even if, and again, I'll just use a guy in reference, but maybe he'll be comfortable dating me and okay with it, but from his friends and family, he'll get, why? Like, why did you pick someone who has so many issues? Why not make it easier for yourself? So when they face that sort of pressure from their peer groups, it's just another obstacle for us, promoting ableistic thoughts.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Amy? Yeah.
As a youngster, I had a learning disability, and my family said, they always said, no, you can't go to college, you can't go to graduate school, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're not going to be good in math. I wasn't good in math, but I did get through math. And they said the can'ts, and I turned it into, I can do it, and I'll do it, and I did it. So I went to college, I went to graduate school. I tied the knot exactly 8 months ago. No, not a shoelace, but I got married exactly 8 months ago. And I've overcome a lot. And, my family supported me through all of that, and they still do. But like I said, I don't take no for an answer. And I'll, at the dating and sexuality table, if you come to that, you'll learn how I met my lovely husband. So, yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to put two questions together, And by the way, also before we close, I'm going to just read every question that was asked. Some of them I think will work better in the small group, but I want everybody to hear what people's questions are. I think that's helpful. So these are 2 questions I'm going to read together. This is addressed to Amy or Isla. In regard to terminology, both of you said that you don't like to use the word disability. But if we advocate for the disability community as a community, and if we own, that's emphasized, if we own our disability, don't we need to use the word? And then a related question is, there was some talk about being better and faster, but I believe that accessibility should not be based on merit. How do we demand accessibility even if we're not better or smarter than average?
Wow, that's a loaded bunch of questions. So I'll start with, I thought my friend Stacy, I don't think is here, but she and I had a big debate when we launched our disability network at BlackRock, which we call our ability network because I was possessed about the word. She has a son with Down syndrome. And so she's possessed about making disability. It's a word, just like any other word. So to the point of the question, yeah, it would be great if we could talk about it like it's just a word, right? And I hope someday we get to that point. But sometimes I think you need to go sort of to the other extreme to end up in the middle. Right, so growing up, look, I had the pleasure of meeting Tim Shriver a while back, who's the CEO of the Special Olympics, and he brought all these videos of, people in the 40s, 50s, et cetera, being put, people with disabilities being put in institutions and locked away somewhere because people didn't know what to do with them and couldn't deal with it. So I think the reason why I push on ability so hard is I want the language to change, and sometimes I think, at least for me personally, because mine is visible and I've gone through my stuff, that's kind of my approach to doing it. But to the point of the question, I think everybody has to pick their own voice in their own way. This is very much an individualistic community. We need to work together to facilitate change and have an impact on a wider scale. But every individual with a disability or somebody who advocates for somebody or lives with somebody with a disability, you have to find that voice in what works for you.
Thank you. Before I transition, I wanted to reflect something Jewish on these questions, which is there is a midrash that I like very much that says that when a king or a queen makes a coin for their kingdom, every coin looks the same. It has the picture of the king or the queen. But when God makes God's coin for the world, we are God's coin, and everyone is completely unique and different. And we've got a long way to go to really realize people internalizing that and understanding that, but that's the vision, and that's what these questions reminded me of. Does anybody else want to address this particular set of questions on the language of ability, disability, and also whether people need to feel that we, need in any way to deserve, right, to be able to demand accessibility by being better or different in some way, or ought we not be just really making everybody recognize God's difference in God's coinage?
The second question, could you read that one more time?
Yes. Well, let's see if I can, because I put my questions down. I was being
I think I remember.
so organized. Yeah? Thank you, Candace. Thank you. Amy or Isla, about the terminology, that one?
Yeah, the second part.
Okay. Amy or Isla, about terminology, both said they don't like to use the word disability, but if we advocate for the disability community as a community, and if we own our disability, don't we need to use the word? That part?
No, then there was another one.
There was some talk about being better and faster, but I believe that accessibility should not be based on merit. how do we demand accessibility even if we're not better or smarter than average?
I mean, that's a really, really great question. That's a big one, and I encounter a lot. I've had that brought up in my practice a lot with my clients, because I think that is like a notion that's instilled in us when we're younger to be better, be faster, achieve more, because you have a disability. So be above the rest, or achieve and succeed, which is a good message. But sometimes the second part of that is try not to ask for too much. Do it the best you can and try and find ways to do it, but don't draw attention to it. Don't put like a spotlight on it. And that could be very tiring and very exhausting. And I've had clients who just, you try so hard and you get run down because you're running this marathon and not asking for the help you need, which is written in law through the ADA, what you're allowed to ask for from employers. And you don't have to worry about getting fired if you need an hour for lunch as opposed to half an hour, or if you need shorter work days as opposed to longer ones. And that doesn't mean you are a bad psychologist, or you're a bad teacher, or you're performing below standards than the rest. That's just what you need to do your job as a teacher, for example, because you're qualified and a brilliant teacher. So asking for that, knowing what to ask for and asking for it assertively will help you be even more of a brilliant teacher, rather than worry about being like, oh my gosh, I'm asking too much. They're gonna fire me, blah, blah, blah. So it's a big one that comes up a lot.
Thank you. So I believe that we're coming to the end of our time for the panel. So what I would like to do very quickly is I just want to read out, there are a few other questions because I want people to know what folks in the room are thinking about. And also I'm doing this hopefully so that when people, as you go through the day and you're preparing to go to the small groups, that people will come to those groups feeling very free to bring the questions that are in your heart, even if they are, personal questions. We really hope that people can feel comfortable here and feel that this is a safe, private space so that we can really be with one another in a constructive way. So this question would have been for Isla. It says, you talked about knowing your limitations with regards to disability. Can you give an example of when you've turned it into an ability, and how is this important to you? Also to Isla, could you speak about negotiating salary and how to advocate for your worth in New York workplaces? And this is not addressed to any single one of our panelists. When is it appropriate to disclose your disability? When you start to see or date someone? No, that probably was towards Danielle, or towards Amy, or towards Isla, right? And when you mention having intimate feelings for an able-bodied member of the opposite sex, how do you deal with able-bodied friends who change the subject or even laugh? I think that would have been written in the opposite way, right? How do you deal with able-bodied friends who change the subject when you open up and discuss an interest you have, a romantic interest? And finally, what protection outside of the ADA do you have when you first seek employment in the first interview? And I will also add to that since this is a Jewish group, remembering that to a certain extent, some of our Jewish institutions actually are not as bound by the ADA or the IDEA as other institutions, and that is a very, very significant challenge that we all face. With that, I'm going to bring what was a really phenomenal panel to a close. I learned so much, and I want to say, I was intending to close, with my nugget, and I had a different nugget. And Debbie and I had this long discussion about, can you prepare a nugget? Because I said, well, I can't, relate Jewishly to things that haven't happened yet, right? So I had a different nugget, but now it's not right for the end of this panel, and I want to close really with for me, and maybe other people can feel this too. Isla mentioned having like some kind of visualization meditation to draw aside with, and really remembering that each of us, however you define God in your life, or don't define God, right? We are all sacred, holy people, however we relate to our sacredness and holiness, but to really remember that each of us is that coin of the highest value that we can imagine. Each of us is really minted perfectly as the coin of all that is most sacred in the world, and to hold that vision in our hearts. And we are the currency. And we are the currency. And together, we make a great investment that we should put under asset management so that it will increase. So, to go back to my script here, we are going to take a short break. We invite people, again, to make some friends, to get to know each other, and we will then prepare for the next wonderful section of our program. And I will stop here. Debbie, is there anything you want me to add here that I have not yet added?
Let's just give a round of applause. And we really hope and encourage, not hope, but we encourage really to just turn to people you don't know. You can even move tables. It's musical tables today, and ask somebody, so what does empowerment mean to you? Or you can, ask them to talk about the 3 qualities of a Jewish woman that you admire. We hope there's a lot of mixing and mingling today, so we invite you to take advantage of that. All right.
We now welcome Rachel Kunstad, a mental health advocate who is all things theater while working right here at the JCC. We have the opportunity to experience her use of the arts for mental health advocacy. Her piece today is called Life Day, Choosing Life. Thank you, Rachel, for joining us, along with vocalist Marissa Davis and pianist Anessa Marie.
When I was asked to speak here this afternoon, I had a moment of panic where I thought, I can't speak in public. It's out of my comfort zone. That moment of panic was just that, a moment. But years ago, the thought of leaving my comfort zone ruled my life. I have panic disorder with a history of agoraphobia. I had my first panic attack when I was 10 years old. I was diagnosed with panic disorder at 13. And when I was 16 years old, I became agoraphobic. I was completely housebound for 6 months during the first semester of my junior year of high school. There's a lot more to me than my anxiety. For instance, I love theater. From a young age, I went to Broadway and off-Broadway shows and experienced the magic of live theater. I performed in school and camp musicals as a kid, and when I was in high school, I discovered writing. I wrote short plays, monologues, and lyrics. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, but I knew it involved theater. I grew up in Westchester County, about an hour north of New York City. In 10th grade, every weekend, I went into the city to see Broadway shows. I would babysit on Saturday nights and then spend the money I earned on theater tickets on Sunday. I loved being in Manhattan. It was so alive, filled with passionate, driven people. I loved my theater adventures in the city, but high school was not without hardships. Adolescence is difficult for everyone, even those without mental illness. Growing up into an autonomous adult is terrifying. As 10th grade continued, the world became too overwhelming. Classmates were catty, school was demanding, and on top of it all, I was discovering my sexual orientation. My panic attacks got more severe and frequent, and I began avoiding situations in fear of having a panic attack. I stopped taking my weekly trips to New York City. My world, which had been as big as Manhattan skyscrapers, got smaller and smaller until I confined myself to my house. My agoraphobia threatened my friendships, my education, my theater, and my life. This was before social media and texting were readily accessible, and since I wasn't present at school, I wasn't in my classmates' lives. I was homeschooled by tutors for a few hours a day, and I spent the rest of my time watching daytime television. I had been attending a private high school because they had a great performing arts program. In late September, I was officially expelled from that school since I was unable to get back to school to attend classes. One afternoon, an envelope arrived in the mail, tuition refund papers. It was real. I wasn't going back to school. I would stay in my house forever. I locked myself in the bathroom. I was anxious and depressed, sad and scared. I didn't know what to do. I opened up AOL Instant Messenger, which was as far as social media got back then, and I reached out to the friends I had left for support. "You're a lion who thinks she's a kitten," one responded. "If you can create, you can do anything. If you can create, you can live." I paused, took this in, and breathed. Then I created. I wrote a song, my first, about the intense emotions I was feeling. And one song turned into two, and two turned to four, and on and on. I could have given up on life and myself, but I walked out of the bathroom and started to see the inner lioness within. In addition to my self-designed writing therapy, I had phone sessions with my therapist twice a week where I talked about the underlying issues beneath my panic. I have been very fortunate to have access to mental health care and a relentless, supportive mother who would not give up until I got my life back. On January 9th, 2007, I left my house for the first time in 6 months. I call it Life Day, and every year I celebrate the anniversary of choosing life. This year I celebrated 12 years. I made strides in my life, attending school every day and making new friends, but I still couldn't get back to New York City. It was too crowded, too hectic, and too far from my comfort zone. After finding the right combination of medications and having many therapy sessions with my wonderful analyst, a year later, in spring of my senior year of high school, I was ready to go to New York City. A friend of mine recommended a new musical that was playing off-Broadway, Next to Normal. Not knowing anything about the show, my mom and I bought front row tickets to one of the final performances before it closed. We took the Metro-North train to Grand Central, walked across town, and for the first time in my life, I saw mental illness being depicted on stage, a foot in front of me. The musical, which is about a woman with bipolar disorder, closed off-Broadway, but transferred to Broadway the following year and won the Pulitzer Prize for drama. I graduated from high school that spring. I enrolled in a small local college in Westchester, 4 blocks from my therapist's office. I lived in the dorms, away from home. I continued to push myself out of my comfort zone. My love of theater and my world grew and grew. I got an internship at an off-Broadway theater company in Manhattan, and I decided I wanted to study theater, which my current college didn't offer. I craved an academic challenge in an environment filled with passion and drive. In junior year of college, I transferred to New York University and moved to New York City. I went from a small suburban college of 700 students to a 40,000 student university in the heart of Manhattan. I took theater classes with Broadway professionals. In addition to my studies, I saw about a show once a week. I'm not going to lie, it was a hard transition. I had to leave my therapist, who helped me overcome my agoraphobia. I stupidly started to wean myself off of my medication. Words of wisdom, do not do that. When I realized I'm not invincible, I started working with a new therapist, whom I still see over 8 years later. I was challenged academically and in life, and I graduated from NYU with honors. I was accepted to a graduate program at NYU's Tisch School of Arts, where I received a master's degree, a Master of Fine Arts degree in musical theater writing. As I continued to grow and heal, I struggled with how private to keep my mental health journey. My mother, with whom I am very close, cautioned me not to share my story. She was nervous about how I would be treated. I listened and I kept my secret. I hid my past so far inside me that I felt it pushing its way out. I should be proud, I thought. I shouldn't have to live in cryptic Facebook posts. On the 10th anniversary of Life Day, I came out about my mental illness. The theater person that I am, I wrote a musical memoir, Cabaret, about my mental health journey, and I shared it with the world, having it performed live. I was terrified. I wanted the world to know, but I couldn't help but hear my mom's voice in the back of my head. Once I began to share my story, I started getting positive feedback from people who have experienced panic disorder, agoraphobia, and other mental health conditions. I was helping others. I could use my struggle for good. I've been expanding the cabaret show into a full-length musical, a song from which I'm excited to share with you. In this song, towards the end of the musical, the protagonist leaves her house for the first time in 6 months. Marissa Davis and Anessa Murray.
Yeah, I think we're good. Sure. Left you first, then the right, steady. Tie the laces, not too tight. They're worn and forgiving, old strangers to my feet, but they have to hit the ground to make their lives complete. Open the door, open the door. Get your coat, hat and gloves, slowly brace the bitter, warm it with love. The wind chill is brutal, but autumn felt the pain. I didn't know the leaves, but winter still remains. Open the door, open the door. Moses spent 40 years in the desert, and I spent 6 months in my room. Almost dead, I said, choose life. Before I died, I cried, I choose life. I choose to live. I will not hide from fear, from panic, from love. I choose to live. I choose to give. I choose to try. Today I do not die. Take a breath, then let go. Exhale. I stay open. Start to grow. Open the door. Open the door.
Thank you. If I had known when I was a housebound, agoraphobic 16-year-old that a decade later I would be living in New York City, working professionally in theater, and inspiring others living with mental health struggles, it seems silly I would get anxious about public speaking. After all these years, I've gotten really good at pushing myself out of my comfort zone. Later today, I will be co-facilitating a discussion with Allison Kleinman, the director of the JCC Center for Special Needs, where we can answer your questions on taking charge of your mental health. If I may pose one question for you to ponder, I ask, what is your life day? When did you choose life? Thank you.
So as we make the transition now, we're going to go from a powerful moment of music from the heart to another powerful moment of music from the heart that perhaps we can all participate in together. People may or be familiar with or maybe hearing for the very first time the beautiful, powerful words of Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav. Kol haolam kulo, gesher tsar me'od, v'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. The whole world, for all of us, is a very narrow bridge, and the main thing is to have no fear at all. All the world is a very narrow bridge, and the only thing for all of us is to have no fear. We are going to prepare now to transition to our next segment. Shelley?
We invite everyone to come back to your seats or to a new seat because we are about to start the next part of our program.
Okay. It's a long afternoon, but it's really quite emotionally packed, and we hope you are getting a lot out of it, as we are. We are now really fortunate to hear from Lori Golden, a trailblazing self-advocate who leads disability advocacy in the corporate world. Lori is the Ability Strategy Leader at Ernst & Young. She will be interviewed by Debbie Fink, Respectability's Director of Community Outreach and Impact, and oversees our Jewish inclusion work. Debbie, Lori, please.
Thank you, Shelley. Lori, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so glad to be here, and I need to
We
learn
just
how to turn on my mic.
need a working mic.
I need
Is this, and now
There
it's
we go.
working. Hey,
Okay,
I'm a quick
okay.
study.
You're a trendsetter, as Shelley said, at Ernst & Young, a company that employs a mere 260,000 people and is one of the biggest accounting, audit, and financial services consulting firms in the world. As I was walking the streets of New York City, I looked up and there was Ernst & Young, loud and proud. I want our participants to get to know you both personally and professionally. So let's start with the personal. How are you today?
I'm great. Very excited to be here. This is really energizing.
Great. We are excited that you're here today. So you yourself have said that you are an open book and you have had to discover the art of your self-advocacy. Will you please share what invisible disabilities you live with and, like Goldilocks, address the challenge of oversharing versus undersharing versus sharing just enough, which we'll also get to a little later.
Sure. Well, first, I tend to use the term non-visible disabilities because to me the term invisible carries tones of kind of purposeful concealment or hiding. And there's obviously no shame and no reason to hide. Unlike some of the panelists you've heard from, I acquired my disabilities later in life. When I was in my 20s, my back kind of suddenly collapsed, and I was diagnosed with degenerative disc disease. Spent weeks at a time in bed and later, a few years later, was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Today, seems every couple of years I acquire new disabilities. I have osteoporosis and a narcolepsy-like sleep disorder, and chronic migraines, and a whole litany of conditions in addition to what I started out with. But, you know, it actually took me a while to come to grips with the value of being as open as I needed to be, sharing what I needed to share in order to get an outcome I wanted. And for me, and I've counseled disabilities work is kind of what I do professionally, so I've coached many people on this, where health and safety are a consideration. It's really important to share as much information as you need to keep you or others around you safe or healthy. If performance, and I don't mean just performance at work, but meeting interpersonal expectations is a consideration in terms of your disability, you need to share just enough to set appropriate expectations so that you don't appear to disappoint somebody's performance or behavioral expectations of you. Sometimes actually sharing around a disability can bring you closer to people. So one reason to share often, and one value in sharing at least some information, can be it brings the two of you together. I recently went on vacation for 10 days with a woman I didn't know very well, and we shared a lot with one another about our own disabilities and family stories and everything else, and it brought us a lot closer together. We all kind of find that in our lives. So you need to decide what your parameters are.
Thank you so much for sharing. And yes, I mean, it can be a bonding experience to
Yes.
share with others and to get that validation and to go from there. So thank you. So pivoting now to your professional hat, wearing your professional hat at Ernst & Young, you are EY's strategy leader. Can you briefly share some of your strategic, innovative disability advocacy programs that you have brought to the workplace?
Sure. But before I do, I'd like to kind of harken back to a discussion that the panel had around terms, disability, abilities. And this links to my day job at Ernst & Young. At Ernst & Young, we tend to talk as much as possible about all abilities or diverse abilities. That's not to say we never use the word disability. In an employment context, it has very specific meaning. We know that in terms of the ADA and in employment law. However, when we universalize, we make disability not a small thing that is seen to affect a few people. It's harder to marginalize an experience that almost everybody has, and we all know that disability is on a continuum. We have all had disabilities or will have disabilities at some time in our lives. So to create a binary that there are people with disabilities and there are people with who are typically abled seems to me a false binary and not very helpful to anybody. I'd rather focus on the fact that each of us has a unique combination of abilities. And some of those are more welcome than others. And those wax and wane at various times in our lives. I mentioned every couple of years I seem to acquire a new disability. So we are trying to change the frame of reference by changing the language that we use. Now, some individuals see themselves as disabled and proud, and that's great. Far be it for me or Ernst & Young or anybody to tell any individual how he or she should identify. We also, I see the 1-minute sign. While I was talking about that, we also have 2 initiatives that we're really proud of that were launched in the last couple of years. One is around neurodiversity. We specially source, train on board, and support individuals on the autism spectrum to do very high-level professional work. And I think what's notable is that we are hiring for aptitude and then we're training for skills. We're not just hiring people who happen to have relevant work experience or education experience, but we're hiring people who we know have the basic ability and then giving them the training they need to use that ability. And then the other is around mental health education and awareness to equip all our colleagues to understand if somebody that they work with or know might be struggling with a mental health issue and give them a framework for how to be supportive. So taking something that seems really complex and scary, demedicalizing it, breaking it down, and making it approachable so we can help one another.
Thank you. I think specifically based on Rachel's piece prior to this, it's just so critical that companies, corporations like yours are addressing the mental health piece in the workplace. So kudos to Lori for leading the way. So now we get into the real stuff about self-disclosure, which you prefer to call sharing.
Yes.
The first big word is in front of us, the starting point. It's 2 letters, and it is if. If to share. Can you speak to that? And it's relevant to women with anybody with, a disability or any other struggle. So can you address
Sure.
the if question?
Sure. Well, I started talking about that before. If the condition, we'll call it, is going to impact how somebody views your behavior, then it might behoove you to set appropriate expectations. That doesn't mean you need to name something. One of the most useful strategies that I stumbled upon was years ago when I was coaching somebody with Asperger's who had run into a lot of issues at work because he was blunt and very, very honest, as people with Asperger's tend to be, and didn't perceive when he crossed a line and offended a lot of people. And he would raise his voice and not realize he was raising his voice, and on and on. His work performance was great, but nobody wanted to work with him, and so there was a real problem. And what we worked out was a script by which he would say when he was beginning to work with anybody new, a client, a colleague, a supervisor, look, I'm a good guy. I really mean well, but I want you to know, because I think it behooves us in working together to know our work styles, that one idiosyncrasy I have, sometimes I tend to put my foot in my mouth. Can be really blunt. And I don't mean to be. So do me a favor and give me a heads up if I say something that seems too loud or too curt or... So sharing some information, he never named it, never labeled himself, but setting an expectation and letting somebody into that expectation and letting them be part of the solution. letting them help is a way to get closer to people. It's a fantastic bond, and it sort of inoculates you because it's much harder to hold it against him if he's raising his voice or shouting, if you've been warned and if you've been asked for help with it. So the same thing goes for almost any disability situation. Give people heads up where they can help you and ask for help, and that doesn't mean you need to label.
Great. That is such useful advice. Thank you for that. So the next big question, again, it's the Goldilocks, which we pretty much addressed to some degree, is how to share, how much to share. It's too much, too little, just enough. So if you can quickly sort of touch on that again.
Well, you said it when you said just enough. And, you know, I'm not being coy here. What's just enough depends on your personal style, depends on your relationship with the person that you're speaking with, depends on the context and the purpose. So if it's a personal relationship and you are close to somebody or want to get close to somebody, you might share one set of facts. If you are requesting an adjustment at work in how, where, when, or with what tools your work gets done, also known as an accommodation, another word I don't really like, then you might share another set of facts. If you are, like me, somebody who really wants to let people in, that's an important value for me. I want people to know me. Then you may share more. My best friend who has a disability values privacy above all else in all aspects of her life. And she shares almost nothing. So you need to determine what's right for you to fit the context and the purpose for which you're sharing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Very well articulated. So then we get to, when do we share it? The big question, when?
I'm going to sound coy again, but when the situation demands it, or when the situation could be improved by it. So again, you need to think through why, what, when, how, according to what your goal is. If you are asking for somebody's assistance at work to change something, or you're asking somebody to help you out with something that is difficult for you to do, or you're wanting to get close to somebody, then, you know, the purpose and the context helps determine when and where you share. If you are sharing with a supervisor or an HR person in kind of a formal context who is representing an organization that you're working for, then that's private information, and you may share it in a very kind of private, closed-door way. If, however, just to give you the opposite end of the spectrum, you are sharing because you want to empower others. You want to be a role model. Then you share in a public way. I had a really seminal moment, it's probably about 4 years ago, where I was on a panel talking about disability, nothing to do with my particular situation. And I was with 2 other women, and none of us appeared to have disabilities. And very well-known disabilities advocate who knew a little bit about my situation, approached me after, and she said, that was a great panel, but what a shame nobody with visible disabilities was on that panel. And Lori, it would be great if next time you share that you have non-visible disabilities, so people know that there's somebody up there with disabilities speaking. And I said to her, oh my gosh, but this isn't about me. I don't want to turn the topic to me. The focus should be on the content. And she said, it is. But understand that by not saying that, people could come to the conclusion that there's nobody with disabilities who had something worthwhile enough to say on the panel. Because you're not making it obvious they're not seeing it. And so you have a responsibility. And it changed the way I approach things.
Thank you. That's key. And it's like, yes, making sure that there are women on a panel when a conversation is happening, a panel is happening, yeah. That we all sort of look at that representation in terms of ethnicities, et cetera. This is putting the D of disability back into diversity. So, and last but not least, we are running out of time, but is the with whom, and you touched on that. So we don't have the time to get into it, but perhaps at the table you could address, with whom do we share the information? And I would love for you at the table, at the breakout, to address their legal limitations versus the person's legal rights on what the individual can do with the information once it is shared. But we'll wait and we can sort of push that out. Do you have like a short nugget that you can address that with?
Address the legal...
A teaser for later.
Well, if you're talking with somebody who is representing an organization in a formal capacity, then confidentiality applies. If you're speaking with somebody in another context, then you can ask for confidentiality, but it's on that person's honor. So, yeah, that's the very short answer.
That's concise. Thank you. And you'll be able to ask many more questions of Lori and Isla at one of the small group sessions, which is about self-advocacy. So, Lori, this has been so valuable. And I just want to share, well, we're going over time, but just a really quick question I have for you to close out is, 20 years ago, if you have a pearl of wisdom you wish you had received 20 years ago or more, what would it be?
This sounds so obvious, but know yourself. Know what you're comfortable with. There is no, and Isla said it, she and I talked about this beforehand, but there's no one right answer. What all of us here speaking and in the tables can share with you is a framework for how to think about things. But it's up to you how to apply that framework. So don't let anybody tell you that, quote, you should disclose or you shouldn't disclose or how much to disclose. You need to decide, and all we can do is help you run through those considerations.
Thank you so much. Let's give Lori a round of applause. Lori, that was great. Thank you. So, lights up still. Thank you. So now, as I said, Lori and Isla will be co-facilitating the Taking Charge of Your Self-Advocacy. You can continue there. So now this is a moment of transition where you can all take 10 to 15 minutes, 10 minutes, to
Before you
talk
do
among
that-
yourselves, schmooze, have a nosh, use the
Okay.
bathroom.
But before you do that, I just want to conclude the live streaming portion of our program. Respectability and the JCC Manhattan thank all our live streaming attendees for joining us. Please complete the survey online and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Bye, live streamers. Thank you for joining us.